What is Bitcoin? It's the perfect free market, right? It's borderless. It's global, you know? If I were to explain Bitcoin to anyone, I would just say to them, look, it is a bit like the US dollar or the British pound. You know, it's peer-to-peer. You can spend it, you can save in it. But what makes Bitcoin different to all these other TradFi currencies is it's decentralized. It's the state have nothing to do with it. They cannot interfere with it. The other thing that makes Bitcoin unique is it's 21 million Bitcoins. And that number of Bitcoins cannot change. In sharp contrast to TradFi currencies, every TradFi currency has increased in the past and will continue to increase due to mismanagement by central authorities.
Today, I'm excited to welcome Nav Singh to the podcast. Nav is an advocate for free markets, Austrian economics, health, and Bitcoin as a tool for self-sovereignty. His unique perspective blends Bitcoin knowledge with spiritual wisdom rooted in Sikhism. Welcome to the Bitcoin Edge, Nav.
Thank you for having me on, Paula. It's a great pleasure to be here with you and for giving me this opportunity.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear how all of this blends together. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, quite recently, actually, I would say it's all pretty much come together over the last 24 months. I have to say your spectacular YouTube channel was a major part of my journey into learning more and understanding Bitcoin. I think it was several months ago. I was away on holiday with the family, and what I would do was I would go for a walk, and I would listen. I would get through like 2 or 3 of your podcasts. I was listening to other podcasts as well, but your one in particular, what I liked about it was you had a pretty interesting range of people, not necessarily some of the well-known, famous Bitcoiners, but you know, a lot of the unknown individuals, people like myself. So it was really good. I think that really helped me down the rabbit hole. I learned a hell of a lot. And I think that was a lot of the reason behind me reaching out to you and asking for the opportunity. So once again, thank you.
Oh, I'm really glad to hear that. Thanks for letting me know. What was it initially that led you to Bitcoin?
You know, I just thought my very nature is I'm a natural saver. A lot of people struggle to save, but for me, it just comes naturally. I'm wired to avoid spending, especially if there's bigger returns in the future. But what was a frustration, an ongoing frustration, was the fact that there really wasn't a reward for saving, and there hasn't been a reward for a long time. I think the last time there was anything close to anything reasonable was when interest rates were like 5.5%, 6%, but that's going back before the financial crisis. And around that time, I graduated from uni. So, yeah, I mean, ever since then, as you know, since the financial crisis, we've had this zero interest rate policy, which, you know, it's inflated hard assets, it's inflated financial assets, but it's been really to the detriment of savers, people like myself. So it got me thinking, it got me doing a bit of digging. I've been a massive fan and advocate of gold. I think that's a lot to do with the culture I'm coming from. My family comes from India, Punjab. That you know, and you know, has this affinity with gold. It comes naturally to them that you know, if they get a bit of wealth or a bit of money, it's quite common for Indians to convert it to gold. So I was aware of Bitcoin. I came to know about it early on. It was in the media, so I don't think anyone could hide from it. But I must admit, I was largely skeptical, thinking that it was a Ponzi scheme or that it would go away, it would fade away. I kept drawing parallels between Bitcoin and the tulip bulb mania, the Dutch tulip bulb mania. And then there came a point, I think it was after COVID, there came a point where I thought to myself, hang on, all these booms and busts kind of came and went away, and Bitcoin keeps coming back. So actually, when we look at the Bitcoin chart, what we see is 3 or 4 boom and busts. But what's peculiar about Bitcoin is it's actually not boom and busts, it's volatility. right? And the thing about Bitcoin is it just keeps coming back. And that's what I've really closely paid attention to, especially coming out of COVID. I think in 2022, it was a horrendous bear market, and I thought that was it. And the reason why I thought Bitcoin was never going to come back was mainly because I thought perhaps Bitcoin did so well because of our zero interest rate phenomena from the financial crisis. But of course, in 2022 and 2023, we had rising interest rates around the world. And I really thought that was it for Bitcoin, but I was wrong. And the one thing I've learned in my life, a bit late, but better late than never, is when you're wrong, you should change your mind. You should always have an open mind and reconsider, and whatever it is. And that's exactly what I did around sort of towards the end of 2023. I started listening to podcasts about Bitcoin. I started learning more about it. My professional career has largely been involved with TradFi institutions like stock exchanges, fixed income platforms, and such, working mainly on the technology side. So I'm kind of familiar to TradFi. So for me, it was pretty straightforward to get my head around Bitcoin. It took some time. I did some digging. It took a few months actually, and it's an enjoyable process. When people say you've got to do the work, you've got to do the reading, you've got to read the white paper, and they make it sound like it's really difficult and complicated. But personally, my experience was it was a very enjoyable journey, and I still enjoy listening to podcasts and learning more about Bitcoin. There's always something to learn every day.
Yeah, that's a really cool journey. And you kind of remind me that the ability to say, well, I might have been wrong about something and change my mind, that's a sign of a strong person. And many people say that Bitcoin is an ego journey. Do you think that's one reason why more people don't get Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're in an interesting time right now. Coming from the tech industry, we've now got AI, and AI is doing its thing, and I think this is where the ego comes along, right? The ego's there to say, "Hey, I'm going to do this myself. I've been doing this 20 years, so I'm very experienced." But along comes AI. It's knocking on the door and saying, "Hey, I can do what you've been doing for 20 years better than you," right? So I think we're going through this interesting period in the economy and certainly in the tech industry where we're now being challenged by a more modern technology such as AI. And it's interesting times. We don't know for certain which way this is going to go, but it's certainly testing everybody's ego, including my own. And there's Bitcoin. It's a very conservative kind of calculation of its performance, or you can say capital appreciation is 30%. Some people say 60%. But moving forwards, I think it's reasonable to assume Bitcoin's going to continue doing 30%. If I put my ego aside, that essentially means Bitcoin's going to do far better than any of my own personal pursuits. Either it be career related or professional pursuits. Over the long run, 30% per annum. If you just visualize the power of compounding over a period of minimum 10 years, the returns are astronomical. Just put it into an Excel spreadsheet. Start with 10,000 and just see compounded 30% returns over a period of 10 years. And then do to 15 years, and then do to 20 years, and then do to 25 years, and you'll be surprised. Our minds we're not wired to think exponentially, but you start to see these returns compound, and it's truly humbling what Bitcoin's doing. And it reminds me of what gold has done. I mean, Bitcoin has far outperformed gold, but it is sending a message, and that message is, this technology is disruptive, and it's outperforming the S&P 500. It's outperforming the Nasdaq. It's outperforming the average business operation. It's outperforming some of the top companies in the S&P 500. and in the FTSE 100. And that's saying something.
Yeah, that certainly is. And I often talk about how before Bitcoin, I felt I had to invest in all these different stocks to try to make enough to beat inflation, which they tell us is around 3-4%, but I feel it's much higher. Is inflation one of the reasons that TradFi punishes savers?
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. It goes back to the so-called 2% target inflation rate, which appears to be a given in TradFi, and no one seems to question or challenge it because it's always been the case. It's always kind of been the case in recent history. So we just take it because it's coming from the central bank. But I think it was Jeff Booth, who you've had a few times on your show, who actually questions that 2% inflation target. He's also mindful of AI and what AI is doing. It's deflationary. The very nature of AI is it's deflationary. And if anyone thinks it's not, here's something to take away and think about. Usually, when modern technology comes along, it comes with a price. Okay, and it takes some time, several years at least, if not a few decades, for the cost of that modern technology to fall enough for the kind of mass enterprises and mass population to embrace it. Well, ChatGPT came towards the end of 2022 and it was free, right? It was not 500, it was not £1,000 a month or anything like that. This is the twist to the story. AI has come and it's free, and it's like, what do we do? How this is going to have a profound impact, and I don't think anyone's prepared. I don't think I'm prepared.
Yeah, I agree. It's really hard to actually keep up. Let's go back to, you have said that Bitcoin and self-sovereignty are so important to you. Why is the self-sovereignty aspect so important?
So to me, Bitcoin is a technology like similar to the internet, and the very nature of this technology is it's disruptive. And to me, what disruption means is it's a double-edged sword. It destroys the old and creates new. Okay, so there's a lot of opportunity there. It doesn't have to be negative. With the negative comes a positive, and it frees us from the shackles of TradFi. It frees us from the control that the central bankers and the government and the state has on our currencies, on our monetary system, the control and the stories they spin relating in relation to inflation. Their centralized control gives them they're in a position where they can manipulate us and really kind of control the storyline and fool us into believing that we must have 2% of inflation when reality is, yes, we've had a period of inflation, but there is deflation on the horizon. In terms of sort of sovereignty, I think it's the freedom element with its 30% annual performance. Looking ahead, I think there's a massive element of relief and freedom. It kind of, to me, when, like I said earlier, about the compounding effect of 30% per annum, it's so great that it could free humanity to focus on other things. And those other things are, what the world really needs. And that kind of ties in with, free markets and Austrian economics. But to me, that's what sovereignty is. There's also an element of how sovereignty kind of ties back to Sikhism, the religion that I follow. And I would say the core principle here is, as a Sikh, we believe there's one God, that there's nothing but God. That means God is everywhere. God is inside of every being, everything, and outside of everything. So we're all one. We're all one unified energy. We are fooled into believing that we're all separate from one another, which is a concept of Maya. The Bitcoin has that connection with spirituality, which also ties in with Sikhism. There's a sovereignty element. going back to the point I made about God being everywhere and God is inside of all of us, then we are sovereign. And if we're sovereign, who is the state to tell us what to do? Who is the state to tell us what to do with our money, why we should be taxed, so on and so forth? Who are the state to tell us what to do when there's a pandemic, when we are sovereign? I mean, God's inside of us. So doesn't that mean that we're essentially really special? And if we're so special, then, along with sovereignty comes a whole load of other things, like, for example, the empowerment. Empowerment, I think, is the thing I've been trying to explain in various other ways. But I think that's the key thing about sovereignty is empowerment. And when I studied the history of Sikhism, a major element of it is empowerment of individuals and a community.
I really like that. And we're going to talk more about that. But as far as Bitcoin and self-sovereignty go, with self-sovereignty comes a great responsibility because we have to keep it safe. Hey there. Want to sleep easy? MICROSEED lets you stamp your seed phrase onto a small steel washer. Buy the device once and use it forever. I love it. It's discreet, precise, and easy to transport. Get yours below. For peace of mind with collaborative custody, the Bitcoin Advisor is a trusted team who can also help with inheritance planning. Just scan the QR code or use the link below. Now, back to the show. And I recently spoke to somebody who lost 7.4 Bitcoin in self-custody. Do you think these risks put some people off?
Yeah, I can relate. I was aware of a lot of these risks, and as I went down the rabbit hole, I learned a little bit more about, self-custody and some of the horror stories in relation to self-custody. But equally, you also have to be mindful. There's many horror stories in TradFi. For example, the going back to the financial crisis, a lot of people lost their money in Iceland. They couldn't get access to their bank accounts because banks were collapsing. There's also similar horror stories of people urgently needing money, like large sums of money from their bank for an urgent health emergency operation, and the bank has kind of turned them away. And that's just ludicrous. You've worked so hard for that money, you've saved it in the bank. Firstly, you're not getting rewarded for it because of zero interest rate policy for the better part of the last 2 decades. And secondly, when you need it, it's not really there. In regards to the unfortunate few who have lost their self-custody Bitcoin, it is still early days. What's happening is, and I can see this as technology is improving. There's more startups. There's more enterprises forming within the Bitcoin space who are making it easier and safer for people to do self-custody. And for me, when I learned about self-custody, to me, it meant essentially it's a bank in your pocket, right? There's no middleman. There's no intermediary. There's no broker. There's no bank. It's in your pocket, like the iPhone is a supercomputer in your pocket. Bitcoin self-custody is a bank in your pocket. And I think that's quite powerful. Powerful in the sense that you could be anywhere, you could go anywhere around the world, and you've got a bank in your pocket. You control the keys to that bank. And I just think that's quite a mind-blowing concept to firstly understand. And once you understand it, you really appreciate it.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up about traditional finance. There have also been major problems. And I have family in Cyprus. And in Cyprus, it happened also. Anything over $100,000 was you lost. So it has happened, and it's happened in some pretty major countries. And yeah, something about having that self-sovereignty and being my own bank makes me feel empowered. But I realize that in order to do that, I have to be pretty good about security and all of that.
Yeah. And also I think, look, we've got to be pragmatic as well. And this is kind of the way I see it, and not necessarily, I'm not saying everyone should see this. And I also appreciate there are hardcore Bitcoiners who would only self-custody. For me, I'm a bit pragmatic. I think there's no harm in, diversifying and owning Bitcoin. And it's okay to have it on exchange. It's okay to self-custody some. It's okay to indirectly own Bitcoin as you can through companies like investments into companies like MicroStrategy. And I think ultimately that's where we're headed. Bitcoin seems to be finding creative ways to integrate itself into various parts of the economy, and it seems to be quite a clever way of gaining traction. I say clever because people are not noticing, and that's perfect. That's what you want. You want people to notice when it's too late, and then they turn around and say, "Oh, there's nothing we can do. It's too big to fail now." Like the investment banks, right? They were too big to fail in 2008, 2009. I see Bitcoin really it's interweaving its way into stock markets. It's interweaving its way into fixed income. It's interweaving it eventually going to interweave its way into real estate, into mortgages, into loans. It's just going to become part of everyday life.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. For now, those other rails work. I too listen to Jeff Booth a lot, and he believes one day that Bitcoin and fiat cannot exist in the same universe, because fiat is inflationary and Bitcoin is deflationary. So he said on my channel that one day Michael Saylor will probably have to choose between those two rails. And for example, if we invest in MicroStrategy or an ETF, that is not self-sovereign Bitcoin. Yes, you will get the cash, the pound, the dollar, but you don't have the Bitcoin. And it's an easy place for the government to co-opt the Bitcoin if they ever need it. So it's just good to be aware of that. But I also did hear Jeff say that wouldn't be till about 20 years, probably. So we've got time.
We've got
And
time.
I think it's a good plan to have some in self-sovereignty. Yeah. So how much do you focus on price?
Quite a bit. It's quite fun, but I've also come along in my journey to realize it's not entirely about price. And that's the thing about the rabbit hole. When you go, before you jump down the rabbit hole, it's all about price. But when you go down the rabbit hole, you start to realize how, this technology is quite profound, and that the end goal is it's really trying to make us realize the truth, right? And that truth is present now and will always be present. And I feel Bitcoin's a technology that's it's gonna achieve a lot of things. It's gonna help us to achieve our goals, but it's also going to do something else, and that is it's going to help us to realize the bigger truth. And that's something I alluded to earlier in relation to not just Sikhism but all religions. I found we have this common belief that we're all one. We're all one part of one unified energy field, where we're all energy beings. We're all connected, but it's Maya. Maya is what's fooling us and making us believe that we're all separate from one another, separate in the form of our egos. And the key is to unlock that ego. And when you unlock that ego, you experience and taste the true essence of life. And for me, Bitcoin is an interesting technology that helps us on that journey. And I can see that through a lot of the people that you've interviewed on your channel. A lot of them have mentioned spirituality. Okay. So it's not because Bitcoin is spiritual or religious. I think the architecture of Bitcoin is such that it brings us human beings together in the way that we will come together in a purely borderless world. Why? Because Bitcoin is decentralized, it's borderless. So when you engage and build in a technology such as the internet, the applications and the platforms that you build on the internet are going to mirror the nature of the internet. So similarly, we have Bitcoin, which is decentralized. So moving forwards, anything that gets built and developed on Bitcoin is going to mirror Bitcoin.
Yeah, I love that. I love that Bitcoin fixes incentives. So yes, many of us come for number go up, But then as our lives get better, then I have more time to look within. And then I want the rest of the world also to be better too, because Bitcoin doesn't work if we don't all succeed together. We're all connected through the mining, through the nodes, just like you said, like in the idea that God is in all of us and yet we are all connected. So I love that. Did you come to that through Bitcoin or did you already feel that?
I already felt it. I was quite fortunate because my parents, I think when they were in their 40s and we were little children at the time, they got quite close to their religion. They learned a lot. They started to study it more, and they started to learn a bit more about the prayers. And they went down that journey, and I went along with them. We would go to the Sikh temple, and I was kind of part of their journey, and really fortunate in that way because I learned a lot about the religion. I think most interesting of all was the people we met on that journey. It was it's really weird. Like you feel really happy when you associate with spiritual people because they make you feel like we're all one. They tend not all, but you know there is a tendency for such people to have less ego, and it's quite nice to be in that kind of environment. I've experienced it. If someone hasn't experienced it, it's very hard for anyone to kind of appreciate it. But as with anything in life, including Bitcoin and including spirituality and religion, I think the best thing to do is sometimes you just got to make the effort and experience it. Um, Here in the UK, and I'm sure in America, in Sikh temples, very early in the morning, around sort of 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, that there's typically an hour of meditation, um, and it's open to everyone. But for me, I would say it's it's really early in the morning. It's very hard to get up and partake, but that that for me is a very practical way of kind of you know experiencing that oneness and that unity. Sikhism is a rabbit hole in itself. There's a part in one of our prayers that talks about the 10 with it. There's 10 gates. So when we say gates, there's holes in the body. There's 9 holes that we're aware of, but there's a 10th gate that we're not aware of, and that 10th gate is in our head. Okay, and the key, it's a hidden key, but it's in the middle of our head. Meditation unlocks that key, so it's not visible to us or anyone, but it exists. It's a spiritual element, and when you meditate, that key, if you're lucky, unlocks that 10th gate. But when that 10th gate is unlocked, the ego dissolves, it melts. And when that happens, that's that feeling of unity and oneness comes. And it's I wish I could experience it whenever I want, or I could say all times. I don't, but there are people who do a lot of meditation and do experience that. But all I can say is if it's a very emotional. A lot of tears come when you try to at least kind of get even close to that experience. Yeah, it's definitely something you need to experience. It's very hard to explain.
Yeah, I love that. And do you think that people who are more spiritual and connected and curious are more likely to embrace Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, look, unfortunately, a lot of spiritual people who are trying to do good, they're trying to serve mankind. There's humanitarian organizations who help out when hurricanes occur and earthquakes and such. But they're dealing with TradFi. They're dealing with charity organizations who are trying to raise funds in US dollars or British pounds, and along with it comes corruption. It's just the design of currency. It's the design of the system. A lot of the charity funds, as good as it is, I'm a big fan of all the good work that these humanitarian organizations do, but at times some of these funds come their way because people are trying to avoid tax. people are money laundering. It's not ideal, but it's better than nothing. There is a world outside of TradFi which Bitcoin will bring. I believe it will bring, and that's the promise. And that's a world where we have it's decentralized. It's outside of the hands of the government. There is no concept of, tax avoidance. There is there is no concept of money laundering. It's a pure form decentralized monetary network, which is open and accessible to anyone, regardless of their color, their creed, their religion, their beliefs. Anyone can buy and own Bitcoin in self custody.
Do you think more people need to see the problem before they get to Bitcoin?
Yeah, certainly. I think Sat Mojo here in the UK, I saw his video about what's the problem. I think videos like that, material like that, certainly helps us to understand the problem. And once you understand the problem, you start to appreciate, you know, I think a lot of people are aware of the problem, and a lot of people who are unaware of Bitcoin are aware of other things like, gold. Like I said, in India, there's a natural tendency for people to turn to gold as a safe haven, as a safe place for them to park convert their TradFi into gold, and that kind of gives them assurance that gold's going to kind of look after them. It's going to outpace inflation, and they can put full faith and trust in you know in the act of saving in gold, um, and have full faith that that gold will reward them in the future when they have to pay for you know um, certain things like their purchasing a house, or starting a business or whatever. Now, Bitcoin is it's digital gold. It's kind of we're in, like I said, our economy is moving really fast. The technology is moving on. We're now at a point where, most of what we do is digital. It's online, and, Bitcoin is digital gold. It's superior. It's superior in quite a few ways. Takes time to understand the differences and why Bitcoin is superior. But once you do understand, it's quite mind blowing.
I know gold has reached all-time highs recently, and it does store value quite well for people. But it's clunky. It's not so easy to transport, right? It's not so easy to verify it's gold. Like Bitcoin is verifiable immediately. Do you think there are more and more people in India realizing the value of Bitcoin?
It's really early days in India. I think the thing about India is they already have the advantage of gold. You know, I mean, one can argue that they're they're generally at an advantage because of the cultural side of things and their natural affiliation towards gold. So, it's still early days for Bitcoin. I don't think that the government's so warm towards, ownership of Bitcoin, which is why I say it's still early days. But if you go to an Indian and say, "Hey, how do you keep up with inflation?" Their simple answer is going to be gold or real estate, right? Whereas here in the UK, when you ask anyone, "How do you keep up with inflation?" if they're not aware of Bitcoin, they're unlikely to be aware of gold because it's not really a cultural thing here. And their answer is going to be, "Oh, I have a savings account," which is definitely not keeping up with inflation. If they're lucky, they have some investments in stocks. And it's likely to be in the FTSE 100. The FTSE 100 over the last 20 years hasn't really gone anywhere. It's only started to perform well in recent months, but you know, so I'd say here in the UK, people are probably more in need of Bitcoin. But also, I appreciate there is an argument where Bitcoin serves a massive purpose in the developing world. I can see why in places like Africa, Bitcoin adoption is a lot quicker and faster because they seem to be picking up technology much faster. They seem to be leapfrogging a lot of the infrastructure and technologies we had to get through. So yeah, Bitcoin probably would come to a lot of people in Africa faster than, the likes of a lot of people here in the UK.
Bitcoin is used as a medium of exchange there because a lot of their currencies are so poor.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Bitcoin is still a bit volatile. It's still being used though, and it can be used as a spend and replace, even in UK and the US. What made you become so passionate about free markets and Austrian economics?
I did a project at university on how technology can help various parts of financial markets. That then led me down kind of a TradFi rabbit hole where I, stumbled across the Quantum Fund. Quantum Fund was one of the best performing funds in the 70s. It was run by a chap called George Soros, who's famous for breaking the British pound. I think it was early in the 80s. And in the Quantum Fund there was a chap called Jim Rogers. He was working with George Soros, and so Jim Rogers was a pretty interesting character. He wrote a few books about his travels around the world. So he traveled the world twice. The first time he traveled was shortly after he retired. I think must have been 37 or 38. So obviously he did really well at the Quantum Fund. So yeah, he traveled around the world on a motorcycle. I read that book, and then his next book was, I think it was 10 or 15 years later. He traveled the world again in a car. So yeah, I read both of his books, and I would say it was one of those books that I really resonated with me. But what I found with Jim Rogers was he had a unique ability to find, markets that were, ripe for outperformance. And he talks about a lot of that. He talks about his journey on how he finds and what he looks for. And I would say a lot of it was underpinned by Austrian economic thought, mainly because he referenced, the term Austrian economics in his a lot of his podcasts and in his books. So in a nutshell, when he's not traveling to countries like we conventionally travel. We take a plane, we get off at the airport. What Jim Rogers was doing was he's actually crossing borders. He's on a motorbike or he's in a car. And from his experience, usually his experience at the border would kind of determine whether the country was deserved of investment or not. The behavior of the border officials, they were friendly, they weren't hostile. If that was the experience, that there was a very good chance that he would eventually open a brokerage account at the stock exchange and invest a sum of money. According to the data, those investments really did well. I was intrigued by that, and that kind of encouraged me to learn a little bit more about Austrian economics. And what I learned about Austrian economics was really pretty much in line with what Jim Rogers was talking about, and essentially what he was looking for was a free market. So a free market is a frictionless economy, frictionless in everywhere, in every way. So, for example, if you want to get from point A to point B, it should be easy. You should be able to do it pretty quickly with very few, intermediaries, very few bottlenecks. It should just be seamless. And then that brings us on to Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin? It's the perfect free market, right? It's borderless. It's global, and something that I think Jeff Booth, I bring his name again because I've listened to a lot of his podcasts, and he really helped me down this route and understanding Bitcoin better. But and I agree with him. Bitcoin is the perfect free market. And why is it perfect? It's perfect because the state is not involved. It's decentralized, and that's the thing that really, for me, it really separates. If I were to explain Bitcoin to anyone, I would just say to them, look, it is a bit like the US dollar or the British pound. It's peer to peer. You can spend it, you can save in it. But what makes Bitcoin different to all these other TradFi currencies is essentially it's decentralized. It's the state have nothing to do with it. They cannot interfere with it. The other thing that makes Bitcoin unique is it's 21 million Bitcoins, right? And that number of Bitcoins cannot change. So that's in sharp contrast to TradFi currencies. Every TradFi currency has increased in the past and will continue to increase due to mismanagement by central authorities. So that's how I would explain Bitcoin to anyone. If they've got a problem with that, then good luck. If they've got a problem with a currency or a network that's outside of the control of the state and that's limited in supply, then they've got a problem in investing in Picasso. They've they've got a problem in investing in beachside property, you know. Then good luck to them. I don't think they understand or get it.
Yeah, it certainly is a journey. And you're absolutely right. Jeff Booth says that we have never seen a free market, a fully free market yet. It was more free when we were on the gold standard because at least they couldn't print as much money. But now the money printer has gone crazy. So the free market does not exist. And Bitcoin offers that opportunity. But it is certainly a journey to get there. And how do you think Bitcoin's changed you the most?
I think it's brought a lot of calmness. I would say I'm more positive about the future. When I speak to a lot of people, they tend to be quite anxious about the future and their children. I've got 3 kids and they're just, anxious in regards to, they just don't have the confidence that, for example, there's a common saying now, how is it even possible for our children to afford the real estate here in UK, when they're in that position to buy? I was one of them. But for me, Bitcoin is hope. Like you said, it's a perfect free market, and we've never experienced a perfect free market. But for me, perfect free market means that we all benefit from, everyone's input. If there's an innovation somewhere, it could be anywhere in the world, and we're on the Bitcoin network, everyone will benefit from that innovation because there's no central control. There's no one in the middle who's controlling that vehicle, right? We're at a crossroads. We've got AI. It's free. It's available to everyone, but a lot's going to come out of AI. A lot of people are going to build interesting innovations and further technologies on top of AI. But I think the key question is it going to be controlled centrally, or is it going to be decentralized? And this is why I feel Satoshi had to create Bitcoin such that, for the good of humanity, the exponential improvement in technology that we're experiencing now and we're going to continue to experience, that improvement has to benefit mankind. It cannot benefit the few. And for me, Bitcoin is hope. It's a perfect free market. A perfect free market is great. It's hospitable. It's charity. It's the perfect charity. Because if you think about it, if someone invents something in Africa or in South America and it's on the Bitcoin network, everybody benefits, So the best charity is build on Bitcoin, because you're going to help someone somewhere.
Yeah.
I can't say the same about a lot of the innovations that are coming out of TradFi. I can't say the same about a lot of the breakthroughs and a lot of the tech improvements that are coming from, some of these established, very, very large social media companies, because they're using it for their own benefit, Like a good example of it is, how they're hoovering a lot of our personal data. That's our private property. This is where self-sovereignty comes into it, right? So they've been in a position to hoover all of our personal data, our sovereign data, right? Essentially, that they've ripped apart every essence of us. They've used that data to train their algorithms, and those very algorithms are money printers, which are benefiting the shareholders of those social media companies. And that's just a flavor of what's happening. When you look at the platforms and see how the younger generation, not just everyone, but how everyone has been influenced and impacted by the social media, it is quite alarming. Now, I'm not one of those people who's discrediting a lot of the good that has come out of, these social media platforms and technologies. I think a lot of good it has connected a lot of people around the world. I don't dispute that. but there's a lot of disturbing stuff coming out of it. And I think that's a lot of it is to do with the centralized element of control of these platforms. And I think Bitcoin's there. It's a double-edged sword. It's going to crush, but it's also going to create. The key thing to look out for is its creation. The creation is going to be free market oriented. That means the creation is going to be for the benefit of humankind. Everybody benefits. That's the beauty of it. And that's what I'm really looking forward to. I'm really optimistic about the future, thanks to Bitcoin. If it wasn't for Bitcoin, I would probably be on a mission to really focus saving entirely in gold and encouraging all friends and family to do the same in gold, because that's probably the next best thing for anyone to do. Real estate is also good, but we're also coming to realize, unfortunately, with land and real estate, it's owned by the government. They may say you're the freeholder, but when you actually own freehold property, you realize there's all sorts of things you have to pay for. Like, here in the UK, we have to pay for, council tax. And these are not small sums. They all add up. And then you quickly realize, they can change the laws tomorrow to benefit them. And they probably will, because, there's a global debt crisis. They've got loans which are unpayable. They're going to try and tap into, these reserves where a lot of capital a lot of the wealth is locked up. But they can't touch Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank goodness for that.
Yeah.
Wow. You went down a big rabbit hole there. I love it because Bitcoin does touch everything. Bitcoin absolutely fixes incentives, because when we pay in Bitcoin or when we create in Bitcoin, it has to be high quality for me to spend my Bitcoin. But whereas with the fiat, everyone's just happy to spend because it's going down in value and people subconsciously know that. So live for today. Don't think about tomorrow. You were a natural saver, but most of the population is not that. So you bring up a lot of good points. I also know you're into health. Did that come out of Bitcoin, or were you into health before?
I don't know. But now when I kind of do anything to do with personal fitness, it's kind of like it's a principle of proof of work, right? And as you know, that does tie into Bitcoin, and it's true with everything in life. What you don't want to do is give a reward without any work. But if you reward hard work, then there's good fruits that come out of it. So for me, that's exactly what fitness is. As with a lot of things in life, you put the work in and then you enjoy the fruits after. So that's where I think health comes in. Yeah. So Bitcoin helps with spirituality. I think also spirituality helps. It's two ways, but it certainly helps with health as well. For me, like I said, Bitcoin is hope for the future, a better world. And it's a world I want to see, I want to enjoy. And we can only enjoy it if we look after ourselves. Going back to the element of self-sovereignty, if God is inside of us, why would we want to consume garbage? If God is inside of us and everyone, we are a temple, right? So you don't want to bring rubbish in, and you also want to exercise the temple. You want to look after the temple and keep it in good working order. So that to me is really important. I just wanted to touch on another important element of sovereignty, which if we got time to do that.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So going back to Sikhism and our history. So we have 10 gurus. It was our first guru was Guru Nanak, and the last guru, the human guru, was Guru Gobind, and then we have the 11th guru, eternal guru, called Guru Granth Sahib. The Guru Granth Sahib is it's holy scriptures. So Guru Nanak initiated the religion. Up until the 5th guru, I would say, it was largely a spiritual movement. And what happened with the 5th guru, whose name was Guru Arjan Dev Ji, he, at the time, the emperor in India was Jahangir, a Mughal emperor, and Jahangir wasn't very happy with the Sikhs at the time. Essentially, Guru Arjan Dev Ji was trying to bring about equality, trying to bring about good, trying to spread the word, bring awareness to everyone about unity and oneness. And Jahangir just wasn't happy about that. His view of Islam was that everyone should be Islamic. And then after the fifth Guru, who got tortured alive, the sixth Guru, Guru Har Gobind, realized that this Sikhism movement was under threat and that it was not enough to be spiritual and meditate. And what he did was he woke everyone up and said, our faith, our goodness, our humanity, our equality is under threat by the emperor. And the thing is, we often forget, but when you study history and try and understand who the Mughals were, in the 1600s, they were the greatest empire in the world, the most powerful. They hosted the most powerful army in the world. And it took one individual, Guru Har Gobind, now sixth Guru, to bring awareness across the whole of India. And that awareness was that we are self-sovereign. So the spirituality continued, but what Guru Har Gobind did was he merged the spiritual element with the martial and temporal element and said, right, we can't just be spiritual. We can't just sit around and pray, but we've got to be in line with politics. We've got to be self-sovereign, right? We have to be ready to challenge and question the powers, right? Har Gobind advocated for self-sovereignty. He pushed for physical fitness, martial arts, accumulation of weapons, and with that self-sovereignty, they challenged the powers, the Mughal emperor at the time, and they crippled over time. They crippled that empire. We're not trying not to forget that history and trying to apply that in our daily lives, and that's just a parallel I see between Bitcoin and what I've learned from the history of the Sikh faith.
I love that. Yeah. Well, I had more questions for you, but we'll get to them next time.
Next time, yeah, that'd be, yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me today. Tell us where people can find you.
I'm on Twitter. You can find me at Bastia Research. That's my address. So yeah, I look forward to connecting with whoever wants to connect.
And I'll put links below.
I really appreciate that. And thank you so much for your valuable time.
Thank you, Nav.
Bye.